more time after being told we can't, or we shouldn't, or we won't be able to, if you hear that enough, you do start doubting yourself without the gaslighter or the narcissist even having to doubt you out loud. You believe it. And that is the gaslighting working.
One of the harder dynamics for people to get their head around about narcissistic people is how much they really do view other people, really in essence as objects or as conveniences, which means that when that object of convenience is not behaving the way you want it to do, it becomes an inconvenience. But it goes a step beyond that, because when they take advantage of other people, it's really that they determine something that this person can bring to them. It can be money, it could be connections, it could be experiences, it could be that they're very attractive and will make them look good to the world. Whatever it is, they will sort of exploit that relationship for what it's worth and get what they can for it. What it can make you feel is kind of gross, as though you're not being seen as a person, but rather as an opportunity to leverage future opportunities. That idea of being taken advantage of is not a dynamic that's just restricted to interpersonal relationships. You can see it in close, intimate relationships. I mean, you catch it in friends. You can catch it in the workplace. You can even catch it in family experiences, where you'll see that one family member, let's say one family member succeeds, that a narcissistic member of that family will attempt to take advantage of that person's sort of standing, experience, whatever, for their own advantage. In the most extreme of this, we'll sometimes see this when a family member maybe makes it big, becomes rich or famous or something like that, and another family member didn't fare as well, and that other family member is narcissistic. They may really try to go along for the ride, almost be a hanger-on, or in the worst example, even cash in on them, turning in uncomfortable facts, uncomfortable family history, or really just sort of dropping a dime on them. There have been recent celebrity scandals where a family member actually was the person, it sounded like a very narcissistic family member, was the person who threw someone else in that family under the bus on the basis of that other family member's notoriety or something like that. So it can be really awful to see it play out in a family dynamic sort of setting. It can also feel horrifying if this is why somebody may be pursuing you. Now, listen, all of us are sitting and saying, well, I ain't all that. What's there really to take advantage of? It's all relative. You may hold a higher position someplace than someone. In the grand scheme of things, you may have access to something they don't have. I don't know, a beach house, a better car, reservations someplace, tickets to a basketball game or something like that. That in wanting that thing or that experience from you, that they may actually then try to take advantage of that person to make that experience. There was actually a really interesting news story that came out that was sort of just went on trial around the time we're making these videos. It involved a woman who was like a real sort of a grifter. She would take advantage of people. She sort of put herself out in the world as though she was some sort of like Russian billionaire's daughter, and had this whole mysterious backstory. And in essence, what she was doing was she was becoming friends with people and exploiting these connections that she claimed to have to get them to pay for stuff that ended up culminating in her becoming friends with a woman who ended up fronting up something like $60,000 for nights out and a big vacation and all of that. And interestingly, that case went to trial. The woman was found guilty, but even throughout the trial, this woman was making a big show of wearing specific kinds of outfits and sort of trying to still look dazzling in the courtroom, as it were. So that's a real example of somebody who was taking advantage of people by telling a story about themselves, twisting the reality so they could get what they want from another person who didn't even have it to give. You see this in corporate settings all the time. When somebody walks into a situation, or business settings, and they see that there's a weakness they can exploit, and they take advantage of it. This happened on massive levels, if you want to argue it that way, in the mortgage banking crash that led to the recession of 2008, where a handful of people took advantage of a system and exploited it, and ended up really taking advantage of the naivete of borrowers. So taking advantage of a weakness or a person for your own gain is something that can happen at a massive level, at the global economic level, or at an individual level. But what narcissists, particularly malignant narcissists, and obviously psychopaths, are really good at doing is finding out a person's weakness or recognizing that somebody has what they want and exploiting any weakness in that situation to get what they want out of that situation for their own gain. When you've been through that on the receiving end, it's horrible. You feel very victimized. It can feel quite traumatic, and in some cases, it can actually be quite tragic. You may lose a lot of money. You may lose reputation. You may lose status, and there may not even be a way to get legal reparations. For example, you may never get that money back. So being taken advantage of in that way doesn't feel good, whether it's an intimate partner, a business associate, a family member. It almost always feels exploitative, and it can even feel traumatic. If you're going through it, sometimes the best you can do is try to get the best reparation you can in this kind of a situation, and sometimes you can't, so you really have to go to a place of radical acceptance and say, okay, shame on me. Hopefully next time I learn. But after those experiences, it can be really, really hard to learn to trust after someone takes advantage of you in such an extreme way. It's a signature calling card of a narcissist to take advantage of other people and take advantage of weaknesses in a system. Hopefully by watching this, you'll be a little more likely to steer clear of that.
Gaslighting is so central and core to understanding narcissism and narcissistic abuse, healing from it, and the word is used by everyone these days, right? Well, I was actually recently doing a lecture for a large group of people, and someone in the group made a really good point that left me thinking for a few days afterwards. I was talking about gaslighting in the lecture, and I was talking about it as when a person denies your reality. And she called me out, and she said, I don't think you have that right. She said, I think it's when someone denies reality. And her point was when we make gaslighting about denial of subjective reality, then the narcissistic person is in a much better position to fight even more mean, right? They say, well, if you have your reality, then I have mine, right? She was right. And this is why the specificity of language when we talk about gaslighting matters so much. Gaslighting denies reality, not just your reality, reality. And we're not going to use this as a philosophical discussion about epistemology and all the rest of it, this idea of what is reality, not a philosophy class, right? So for me to make this more clear, let me just show you some very simple examples of what gaslighting can look like, ones that you're very familiar with. So the gaslighter says, I didn't say that. And they did. In fact, you have a recording of them saying it. That is a denial of reality, not your reality, of reality. You have a recording. They said it. They say, that never happened. And you have evidence it did. Again, that's a denial of reality. Gaslighting is so often predicated on there not being a witness or an empowered witness to reality. For example, a child may witness the gaslighting but be too fearful of contradicting a parent. So the gaslighter can deny something happened, but even without a witness, let's face it, a crime can still be perpetrated, right? They're just harder to prosecute. But so much of this, if no one saw it, it didn't happen, is part of the problem. But I think the distinction that this woman brings up is really, really important, because when we get lost in the idea that they are denying our reality, well, most survivors of narcissistic abuse are so riddled with confusion and self-doubt and self-blame that they do not believe themselves. And as a result, if it comes down to a smackdown between your reality and their reality, you're probably still going to talk yourself out of it because you don't feel solid enough in your reality. But reality, that's pretty indisputable, right? I've talked about the sequence before, this scenario I'd once witnessed, a situation where one person told another person that their doctor's appointment was at a time it wasn't. The person who had the appointment knew it was at 12 noon. The gaslighter said it was at 1. Now, I happened to be there when the appointment was made, and it was written on one of those little cards, and even a confirmation call came in saying that the appointment was at 12 noon. That is reality. The gaslighter insisted it was at 1. That is a defiance and a denial of reality. And the gaslighter wouldn't budge, which if I hadn't intervened would have resulted in a missed appointment for that person because the other person, the gaslighter, refused to drive them to the appointment for 12 p.m. The person it happened to had been so narcissistically abused for so many years that she really doubted herself. I had the good sense to keep the card because I knew the other person in the situation was a gaslighter, and ultimately I turned things around so I could drive this person to the appointment, which of course was at noon, reality. Now remember that gaslighting has a two-part sequence, right? The part two is where the gaslighter then breaks a person down. They tell them that they're lazy or stupid or crazy or disorganized or have a bad memory. That's the part of gaslighting that's about control and dominance. But again, that's also a violation of reality. You are not those things. So if someone is saying, oh, your memory is slipping, unless it is, that is not reality. The part B of gaslighting, where the gaslighter tries to call you mentally unwell or telling you that there's something wrong with you, that is where it gets tricky. But if you can hold on to this idea that it is not subjective reality being denied, but reality, that can make you more steadfast. One problem is that in gaslighting, the part B, they often go at things that we don't feel good about. For example, playing upon our own vulnerabilities, that we do feel disorganized, or perhaps have existing mental health symptoms like anxiety, or even they'll go after historical stuff for us, like, oh, you really are just like your mother, aren't you? Again, that is not reality, but it is like someone knocking us down where we already have a broken bone. It really hurts, and because of that, we often fall. Part B of gaslighting is also where your reactions and your emotions are pathologized. If you have a strong reaction to a cruel comment or situation, they write you off as crazy and take no accountability for the upsetting behavior in which they are engaging. Now, remember also that gaslighting is not about a difference of opinion. That's one way the word gaslighting is often misused. Stupid example. You believe that soft serve is better than regular ice cream. You're gaslighting me because, of course, we know that's not true. No, they're not gaslighting you. They just have a different ice cream preference than you. Opinions are not about reality. Even when someone has a really outlandish opinion or belief, they aren't gaslighting you. They may just be being stubborn or perhaps bizarre. Now, if the person said, there's no such thing as soft serve ice cream, that's a denial of reality and a little bit insane. Or if they said to you, you've never eaten soft serve ice cream, again, denial of reality. But the difference of opinion between soft serve and regular ice cream, that's not gaslighting. And clearly I am craving some soft serve ice cream right now. Now, the other issue becomes motivation. Gaslighters will often try to talk about our motivation and try to make it reality. They'll say, you're angry at me. You don't want me to be happy. Again, if that's not what you feel, then that's not true. Maybe you are angry at them, maybe you aren't. But they work off of that assumption without checking it out first. Again, that's a denial of reality. Gaslighting is also not about interpretation. Some folks will say, oh, well, I didn't kiss her, so that's not cheating, or it was just DMs, so I didn't really betray you. And now that starts getting into the sticks in terms of definitions and interpretation, and it's manipulative and minimizing, all of which are a part of gaslighting, right? And yes, this does get a little bit more to maybe a subjective experience, but in orthodox gaslighting, it's just straight up reality that's being denied. So I can see how sometimes there's some slippages in how people experience this. Let's just think of the movie Gaslight. He denied the idea that the lights were flickering and the sounds were happening in the attic. Those things were not just her reality, they were real, right? And then he told her, you're just tired and stressed and you're loopy. And he got the housekeepers in on it too, so she'd feel crazy. But the flickering lights, even if everyone denied it, they were real. You can see, though, how collective gaslighting is so powerful, with multiple people denying reality. It takes some courage and strength to hold on to reality at those times. And if we have been gaslighted long enough, it's all but impossible to push back on that. So to the woman who raised her hand and brought up that question, I really wish I got your name. I thank you so much for calibrating my language better. It's how we learn. Gaslighting is simply about reality. Not your reality, not my reality, but reality. And we have to be clear on this so we don't give the gaslighters the weapon to turn around and say, well, if you're saying that's your reality, they'll turn it into a subjective battle. Let the philosophers hash out what reality is, but if something happened, it happened. End of discussion. It's cruel to tell someone it didn't. Gaslighting in general is a rather simple sequence, but there's a very specific sequence in narcissistic relationships that's even more simple and that many of you may be familiar with. A narcissistic person accuses you of something you haven't done, or claims something that isn't true, or they break a promise and claim they never made the promise. No, in the first place. When this happens to you, you defend yourself. You give your point of view. You vehemently deny it. You may even become so emphatic as you try to communicate with them because you're being told something so untrue that your volume increases. That's not true. I didn't do that. See, you kind of get worked up a little bit more. You may become agitated. You may cry because somebody's saying something to you about you that's abjectly untrue. Once you become a little bit worked up, you may notice the narcissistic person calms down significantly. They may even seemingly relax. And then they may calmly and perhaps even contemptuously say to you, "What is wrong with you?" Or they will say, "Oh, stop overreacting." They might say, "Yikes, you really are a dramatic and chaotic person." And then they may go on to say, "I am not a fan of drama." And when you hear that, it may activate your own fears about feeling like you're to blame for any issues in this relationship, and you may lose this person. The narcissistic person may say, "You need to calm down. Is there something wrong with you? Maybe you need to see a therapist because you sure do get some strong emotional reactions." They may say to you, "You've become really paranoid. I'm worried about you." And they'll do this from this very calm, almost cold exterior. They may roll their eyes at you and start framing you as an agitated and unhinged person. They may even give you a logical framing for their accusation or their argument, and you now look more unhinged than the narcissist. And you recognize that if anyone was watching this, and they may very well be, that you may look to that person who's watching this whole argument as though you're the one who's really discontrolled. If this sequence happens enough times, your role in the relationship starts to settle in. The narcissist will often instigate you and keep kind of poking at you by making accusations about you and gaslighting, and you respond. And over time, it can start to feel that the narrative is that the narcissistic person is the one who's calm, cool, and collected, and that the other person in the relationship, and that might be you, but the other person in the relationship is the one who's dysregulated, dramatic, and chaotic because they find themselves chronically defending themselves against these false accusations and this gaslighting. Because most people do not want to view themselves as dysregulated and chaotic, you may start tamping down your reactions, buying into the narcissistic person's version of reality. It might just almost feel like they keep saying it. Somebody tells you the sky is, green enough times, you might actually start believing it. You may even seek out therapeutic help, and you're initially seeking it out saying, "Gosh, I'm really dramatic and paranoid," and slowly stop becoming yourself because you actually really think over time you get indoctrinated to believing the version of reality that the narcissist is selling you. Now, the version of reality that the narcissistic person is going to start peddling around town is that, my partner is such a handful. They always get so worked up. Or, my partner is so dramatic and always overreacts to everything I say. Perhaps these arguments have happened in front of other people. And if you do sort of find you're sort of raising your volume and getting agitated because somebody's saying things about you that aren't true, your agitation may sadly support the narcissistic person's version of the events. Here's the bottom line. Nobody out there ever wants to be accused of things that aren't true. So not surprisingly, when someone tells us something false about ourselves or something that's completely not aligned with our reality, we defend ourselves. We provide our version of the events. And when it is clear that the other person is going to keep foisting their version, their twisted, gaslighted version of events on us, we find that we keep explaining our side. We pull out facts, we pull out text messages, emails, anything we have to defend our position. And with a narcissistic person on the other side, this is a mistake because the other person, they're not listening. This is about manipulating you. Not about listening to you, but about manipulating you. This is why understanding high conflict and antagonistic personality styles becomes so important. It becomes so important for so many reasons. Because if we understand this, we may be less likely to fall prey to it. And even more important than that is to hold on to your version of reality and truth when someone denies it. To learn to nod, smile, and just shrug and say, all right, it appears we're just having different experiences of the situation, instead of feeling you have to defend your position to a narcissistic person who's not listening. Don't get me wrong, and by the way, a narcissistic person will get even more agitated if you do not engage with them and respond in a dramatic way. Remember the way that baiting works, and it can even feel unsettling. They want you to look as unhinged as they feel. And ultimately, the goal of all gaslighting is to get sort of mental control over another person. If you have ever gotten caught in this loop, you may actually not understand that a significant part of the gaslighting process is to leave you doubting yourself. That's the goal. If you doubt, you're doubting yourself. And even considering yourself to be an individual who's living with mental illness. Maybe my anxiety means I have an anxiety disorder. You're anxious because you're in a toxic relationship. In so doing, though, you may feel less able to set boundaries because you're so unsure of yourself. You may feel less able to get out of a relationship. You may even doubt yourself in other areas of your life, including at work and in other close relationships, because you're so plagued by this self-doubt. Please practice holding on to your reality, knowing your truth, and always remembering that nobody needs evidence for their feelings. Practice mindfulness, which can allow you to draw upon tools like breathing and mindful focus when you feel like reacting, and to help you get centered when someone is tossing accusations at you. It's important to understand that and I even don't want to call it agitation, but your sense of unsettledness or just sort of, kind of feeling like you're escalating a bit, that your agitation in that way is something that fosters their sense of power. But you may feel a need to let that strong emotion about being manipulated, may need to find a place to share it and find safe spaces in which to share your feelings. This experience of feeling as though you are, you have almost been rendered sort of unstable by this relationship, and internalizing that sense of, I think I might be in an unstable relationship, is actually a big reason that a lot of people out there who think that they're narcissistic actually aren't narcissistic at all, but they've been told it by somebody in a narcissistic relationship, or they've been told many other things that are patently untrue. You have any number of mental disorders. A partner will tell them you have obsessive compulsive disorder, you have anxiety, you have this, you have that. Sometimes they even tell them they're psychotic. But they throw all of this at them. And a person who's constantly having their reality challenged and doubted, it gets exhausting. And after a while, some people find that they don't consent, they relent. They just give in and say, fine, fine, it's what you said. And you can see how that deflates a person and can really pull them away from being themselves. But there's a form of gaslighting that a lot of people sometimes miss, and they even miss it as gaslighting and wonder why it's leaving them so off balance. One form of gaslighting is being told that you're incompetent and can't do stuff. And if that has ever happened to you, that somebody's just told you things you know you can do, and they tell you you can't, drop that in the comments, because you may not have recognized, because that's not the reality. You know how to do this thing. But telling you that you're incompetent is a denial of reality. It's gaslighting. If it's happened to you, drop it in the comments and let's talk about it. Narcissistic relationships are spaces where we feel deeply insecure. There's no getting away from that. Over time, the longer the amount of time we're in these relationships, we doubt our judgment more and more. We don't believe we know how to say the right thing, do the right thing, be the right thing. Our confidence erodes in these relationships over time. Many people at the beginning of these relationships, we're not all shrinking violets. Really strong people get into these relationships. They're very confident people, people who are at the top of their game. But once the narcissist was done with them, they were shells of themselves, riddled with self-doubt, lost confidence, lost self-esteem, and confusion. When we talk about gaslighting, we often focus on the simple examples of them denying reality. Your reality, all reality. They deny you said what you said, did what you did, feel what you feel. And then they top that off by telling you that you're stupid or crazy. It's something that happens over and over again, a slow grooming process and indoctrination. And before long, you stop believing in yourself and are completely under the sway of the gaslighter. As a result of this, lots of people hold themselves back in life. They hold themselves back from opportunities in education, in jobs, and just life and love in general. Because we frame gaslighting as the experience of having reality denied, we miss an important form of gaslighting that really harms people. And it is a denial of reality, but in a different way. The narcissist tells you that you are not able to do stuff. What stuff? Any stuff. You don't know how to drive there. You don't know how to cook that. You don't write well enough to go to graduate school. You're not able to travel alone. You won't be able to take care of a dog. You aren't capable of running your own business. Do you really think that you're going to be able to work and raise kids? I don't think you're going to qualify to get a loan to buy a property. Time and time again, it is a doubting of your competence. Over and over again, they tell you that you are not capable. It is a denial of reality, especially if you actually know how to do the thing that they are accusing you of. The initial feelings and reactions to this are often hurt. And if you react, you say, yes, I do. I know how to cook, or I write really well, or I've driven in all kinds of places, or I grew up with pets, or I used to run a business, whatever. Then they will gaslight you more. They'll say, oh, okay, stop being so sensitive, or stop being so arrogant. You have a very high-headed sense of what you can do. Or then they go with, I think you're being crazy with how intense you're being. Yeesh, I was just trying to give you some constructive feedback and protect you, and you go crazy on me. So there's no having these conversations, because now, after having that conversation, not only are you incompetent, now they're calling you insane. What's unfortunate is that early in these relationships, people may perceive that the narcissist is being solicitous. Oh, you don't know how to drive in that big city or so far. And then the rationalization is, oh, they just don't want something bad to happen to me on that long drive, or they just want to take care of me. Or when they say, well, you're not going to be able to cook all of that for all those people, oh, they're just protecting me. They don't want me to exhaust myself having to cook for their family. Part of why gaslighting works is that it is a grooming process that happens early and takes place alongside love bombing or familiarity. People often want it to work out with a new person, or they want to believe that even a familiar person like their parent has their best interests at heart. We, as people, want to trust, and sadly, after a narcissistic relationship, that is a hard horse to get back on again. But over time, after being told we can't, or we shouldn't, or we won't be able to. If you hear that enough, you do start doubting yourself without the gaslighter or the narcissist even having to doubt you out loud. You believe it. And that is the gaslighting working. You stop taking chances. You stop suggesting new things. You hold yourself back. You turn inward. You live less fully. And then the narcissist wins because you are living under their control. Ironically, and this is often the tragic final act of these relationships, after you have been told so repeatedly that you can't do anything and that you are incompetent and you even stop trying, the narcissistic person may then start getting bored with you or behaving as though you are not interesting. This isn't a bad thing. If they head out, it's kind of a good thing, and you can right away start trying things again and taking your life back. But sadly, some people view that as an abandonment when the narcissist leaves them. A healthy relationship is one in which growth is encouraged, in which taking chances is encouraged, in which trying new things is encouraged. Because healthy people aren't threatened by their partners and they want them to succeed. So when you say you want to go to graduate school later in life, they encourage it. Or you want to start selling your delicious pies, they applaud you for it, may even help you with it. It's what a relationship is supposed to look like. Telling you that you can't do the things that you are able to do is an insidious form of gaslighting. It doubts the reality of your competence and over time erodes whatever sense of competence you had in the first place. The first time someone suggests you can't do something or shouldn't do something, don't get into a fight, but instead say, "Interesting suggestion. And if you don't mind, I need to get to that cabinet because I'm going to go ahead and start cooking the dinner, or taking the drive, or taking the class." Clipping people's wings is a daily practice for narcissistic people. It's a way of keeping us stuck alongside them and takes away the threat that we could run away from them. But please do not allow anyone, narcissistic or not, to erode your sense of what you can do or what you can attempt. If you are coming out of a narcissistic relationship, one of the most important things you can do is to start picking up on the things you were told you can't do. So go ahead and host that dinner party, take that long road trip, get that puppy, start looking into running that business, turn that gaslight off by being competent. If you are still stuck in the narcissistic relationship, do that silent act of rebellion technique I have talked about. Work silently toward a goal, but don't share it with the narcissist, or they will invalidate it or dismantle it before you even get to start it. I don't know, look into taking that online class. Make a meal for friends when the narcissist is not home. Get the part-time volunteer position while the children are at school. Just do it quietly. It's meant to be a way to remind yourself of your incompetence. Of the many losses that narcissists have inflicted on the world, one of the greatest is reflected in the lost potential of human beings who have been stuck in these relationships and never really got to enact all the things they could do. I think of the novels we haven't read, the scientists whose work we didn't get to see, the performers who never performed, the food we didn't eat, the music we didn't hear. Because a narcissist stole that belief in their abilities or possibility from them. One of the most powerful paths of healing is to take yourself back and mentally tell them to go F themselves by doing all of the things they told you that you couldn't do. Don't let this form of gaslighting get you. Never let someone tell you that you can't do something, especially when you know you can. Their projected insecurity can be dangerous. Don't make their shame and sense of inadequacy yours. Don't let their fear of abandonment, which encourages them to clip your wings so you can never leave, hold you back. The world needs to hear and see your gifts and those of many people who have been gaslighted and told that they don't know what they're doing. Thanks again.